Hey, it's the Hash. Happy Thursday. I'm Zach Seward. I'm joined today by Will Foxley, Sandli Handagama, and Naomi Brockwell. We got a lot to get to today. As always, man, this space just never stops. So much going on. Shout out to the fall vibes. Yeah, Control definitely shouted out the fall vibes in the outfits, and I think that's
See,
accurate.
we all got the memo. Good work, guys.
Spring red, a spring pink.
Good job, Teresa.
It's a little different.
All right. Naomi's going to start us off with the story of the day. Naomi, what is going on?
So more news out of Ukraine. The apparent airdrop was very short-lived. That was announced on Wednesday when the government said that they would be releasing an airdrop in order to reward donors who'd been sending crypto to support Ukraine in their fight against Russia. And then today they announced, the announcement was made by the country's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Digital Transformation, Mikhailo Fedorov, and he said that they decided to cancel the airdrop. They said every day there are more and more people willing to help Ukraine to fight back the aggressor. And they said that they're going to now announce non-fungible tokens. They're releasing an NFT to support the Ukrainian armed forces and said that they don't have any plans to issue any fungible tokens. This world is weird, man. I gotta say, like, you got Ukraine talking about airdrops and snapshots and NFTs and non-fungible tokens. Like, I did not expect that this would be the world that we were in. I mean, props go out to everyone who's supporting people who are fighting for their freedom right now, people who are helping civilians in Ukraine. Then you got the Ukrainian government coming in. There's a lot to dig into here. I'm just going to throw it off to Will. Will, handballing that to you.
Oh, yeah, I think you put it there well. I don't know what to make of this. Like, an NFT just seems almost as unreasonable as an airdrop, right? It seems to be a part of like the crypto joke going around and now it's made its ways into national headlines and into international headlines in the midst of a conflict. Whenever the first airdrop tweet came out, people were aghast at it, and there was a huge tweet that blew up yesterday about the number of donations that went to the Ukrainian account after the airdrop notification and before the airdrop notification, and the amount of donations afterwards were parabolically different than the ones beforehand. People are just interested in getting the airdrop token. They want money for money. There isn't a lot of charity on the one hand for a lot of people. I don't understand the NFT thing either. That just seems so. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like there's a lot of taste in it, right? Like an NFT to commiserate, or like, I don't know what the purpose of it would be. Typically, NFTs have been used to like, oh, here's like this cool NBA game I want to be a part of, or this profile picture. And now it's an NFT, like almost like a war monument that, typically that happens after the fact. Naomi, I want to throw this back up to you and see if you have any reactions to that.
I have a slightly different take to most people on this. First of all, there's a huge difference between sending money to a state, to a government's military to fight a war, versus sending money to the people who are affected by this war. So that's the first thing that I'll say there. Second, a lot of people are angry about fundraising efforts that incentivize fundraising. Incentivizing fundraising is what people always do, whether it's done subtly or whether it's done overtly by saying, here is a thing in return, here is an NFT, here is whatever. I have absolutely no issue with finding ways to incentivize fundraising, and it works. As we saw in the charts, they compare, before and after. People want to get in, and that's a way that you can help raise money. I think that that's totally legitimate. I think that a lot of people have this mentality of like being entitled to donations or being entitled to charity, or feeling like it's everyone's responsibility, like they have to do this. It's like, well, this is a thing that people can choose to do, and it's great when they do. We should, feel really happy when people want to support causes that are important. And if we can find ways to make it more in line with their value system, or make them feel like they're more involved in this process, I think that's totally fine. If people are raising money for a good cause, do what works and find a way to raise money. In this account, like, as I said, there's a huge difference between raising money for a government's military and individuals. So it's like, I just have so many mixed feelings about all of this. It's just a really complicated situation. And it bothers me, all of the people who are just egging for war right now, egging for like nuclear war, saying that the US should get involved. Like, like, war is atrocious. War is disgusting. War brings everyone down. It isn't like like you go to war and then you win and you're victorious and the world is better. War makes everyone worse off. And if there is a way to avoid war, it should be explored. Absolutely. So I really dislike this whole mentality right now of people who are just these warmongers pushing for it. I hate this media bias where people are just clamoring down and saying like, yeah, you know, all the fighting, the glorification of all of this stuff, all of the propaganda images that are coming out on both sides with people with their gun, like this, like we should not be feeding into this. People need to get a realistic look at what's going to happen when the starvation occurs, when like the mass slaughter occurs. This is not a good situation. And if we can find ways to help people, however that's incentivized, you know, people who are being hurt by this, we should. And if we can find a way to avoid conflict and avoid war, we should as well, because it's not going to end well. But Zach, I'll throw it to you for your thoughts.
Yeah, I big plus one on all that. And I just want to second sort of the absurdity of this whole thing, right? Like Ukraine cancels airdrop is like a headline that is a headline now. And that's a crazy headline. You know, I've said it before, I'll say it again. This war is not a crypto story. There are all sorts of interesting crypto side angles here, but this is a story of human tragedy on both sides, as Naomi said very well just now. So for this to just be unfolding as a sidebar to this big story of human tragedy, it doesn't make it any less interesting. And I think the airdrop thing was especially interesting. Yes, I'm aware of the absurdity of talking about an airdrop in a time of humanitarian crisis, but it was striking to see those charts, those Dune Analytics charts that show that spike. And it speaks to just how sticky tokens are, right? You know, you could say, hey, this is like, you know, the pledge drive equivalent of the NPR tote bag. But it's tokens, and there's money to be made here, and people will necessarily game those systems to be rewarded perhaps more than they should be in these instances. But to see the stickiness of tokens and to see the stickiness of airdrops and to see these people just sort of, you know, jumping into this thing head first because of the promise of some future thing that no one even knew what the thing was is really remarkable and is a really big feature of Web3 that I think people are slowly kind of waking up to. It's interesting to see this. Again, this war is tragic, but it's interesting to see these stories unfold. I think I'm the next story. We're going to something else. Yeah. It's about Helium, which is a decentralized sort of internet provider, right? That connects these Internet of Things devices with spare bandwidth that users put onto this network. It's sort of powered by cryptocurrency, and it's sort of become a victim of its own success here. This story by Cheyenne is a really good snapshot at this network sort of crumbling under the demand that is being put on it from afar. This is a network that's been up for a while. There's a bunch of these nodes. They sort of mine HNT tokens in reward for you providing bandwidth to this network. And it's gotten some big headlines lately. The New York Times covered this maybe a month or two ago, saying, hey, this is the real use of what Web3 can be all about. And I think what we're seeing here in a new civil suit filed, I believe in California, is that people who are trying and clamoring to get these miners so they can be rewarded in HNT tokens to provide their bandwidth to this network, they're unable to get them by way of supply chain shortages and other things that are alleged in this suit. And it makes for this really interesting situation, captured capably by Cheyenne, of people who are upset that they're not able to get in on this thing. And they feel that they're also being gypped of their future token rewards that this network promises to its users. So this is a really interesting little snapshot of some tension, again, by virtue of this being a bit more successful than maybe even its big backers, A16Z among them, could have anticipated. Interesting story in these documents here. I'm going to toss it to Sandali for her thoughts. What about this Helium piece stands out to you?
I think it's exactly what you said, sort of it becoming a victim of its own success. And we've seen so many issues with supply chains after COVID. And, you know, we see this a lot on Facebook and Instagram when somebody has a new startup for like fashion or something. You know, the comments are about delays in delivery, people complaining, there's no from customer service. So this is not exactly a new story, but I also understand that this comes with a different promise, a promise of returns, a promise of being part of a community. So it hits differently, and I understand where these complaints are coming from. But yeah, that's basically my thought on that. Will, what do you think?
Okay, I'm expecting a sneeze any second now. So if I just spew all over the camera, just bear with me, okay?
Bless you in advance.
It's springtime in Colorado, springtime in the Rockies, and I'm feeling it. Okay. This story brings out the part about crypto most people don't think about, which is the hardware aspect. Everyone's always thinking like, oh, Wind token, Wind Moon, we have all these tokens are all over the place. Well, okay, they live somewhere. They do actually live somewhere. They're either mined, they're on a validator, they're on a server somewhere. They do live somewhere. Even your NFT actually lives somewhere. There's a great piece on CoinDesk by Brady Dale that goes back through where an NFT actually lives. Does it live in your wallet? Does it live on Infura? Does it live on a server somewhere? It does actually live on a specific place somewhere. All that data has to go somewhere. And it's the same thing with HNT here. They had this product. They thought it was going to do well. They built it in the bear market. And then boom, demand hits, and they need 10x what they thought they needed. And you can't know until it hits you, right? So again, you are going to be a victim of your own success. That's a good place to be as a startup, but it also sucks to be trying to figure all that out in the midst of pandemic, in the midst of a supply chain crunch, and now in the midst of a global conflict like we're seeing in Ukraine and Russia. And I only expect these stories to get worse because of that conflict. I think that's going to have repercussions across the board. We saw that TSMC decided to stop sending chips to Russia lately. TSMC makes all the chips for Apple. They make all the chips for Bitmain. They make chips for tons of different computer manufacturers out there. There's a bunch of different computer manufacturers out there. They're going to start doing the same thing. So H&T, I would expect Helium to have even more problems, which is, again, it sucks for the startup team, but that's the risk you inherit when you're trying to manufacture something like this. I guess the note would just be for retail. Like, it sucks. Like that's just how it is right now. It's really, really tough to be purchasing something. Even if you're buying something on Amazon these days, it can be delayed a little bit because there's so much demand. There's so many bottlenecks. And I think most people are pretty used to the world we grew up in before 2020, which is 48 hours to get a package on my doorstep. It's not the world we live in anymore, and there's going to continue to be these issues. So shout out to the Helium team. Maybe they figure this out. Hopefully they do figure this out, but it's definitely a tough side on either side of the equation. Zach, I want to throw it up to you for thoughts, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think it shows some just, early momentum around these user-owned networks, right? That's sort of the rallying cry of Web3. It's like, hey, we can own our data and be compensated in a way that's different from the way that we exist as users of the present-day internet. So for this to sort of be an early example of that, running through some of these bottlenecks that are either, internal or external to the project itself, is just another interesting snapshot in this industry's evolution, I think. But I'm tossing to Naomi for her thoughts.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of what happened with Coinbase with their Super Bowl ad, where you spend so much money on an ad and then it comes out and then the website crashes. It's like, maybe you should have allocated some of that money to having servers that don't crash, have some sort of redundancy there. But I'm a big fan of Helium. I think it's a super interesting project. I like what they're trying to do there. They're also branching out, like they're not just doing, long range, small bandwidth, Internet of Things devices. They're branching into like self-service. They're doing all kinds of things, building out their network there. And so I'm very interested in how this can slowly start to decentralize different parts of the internet. I mean, this initial project that they have, it's not necessarily about decentralizing parts of the internet. It's about incentivizing people to have access. Like if you're setting up sensors in the middle of nowhere, you're on a farm, whatever, you're relying on major infrastructure when there's not necessarily an incentive for anyone to build that infrastructure. If it's just you in the middle of nowhere and there's no reason for a company to come in and put in towers and whatnot. So what Helium does is it incentivizes people to set up these nodes. It actually pays them so that they can, create these super long range signals that are really small bandwidth. So we're not talking about like streaming Netflix here. We're talking about Internet of Things, tiny little bits of information that are able to be transmitted across huge amounts, huge distances. And so it really does solve that problem of infrastructure not being available in a lot of remote areas. And now they're sort of, branching out, looking at like cell service as well, like using all kinds of different facets of radio waves. And so I'm definitely keeping my eye on this project because I think we're going to see more things like this popping up. I think that we're going to see more people trying to figure out how to incentivize different, ISPs and all kinds of things like that. And it's going to be very interesting next decade. But Sandali, I'll throw it to you for final thoughts.
I think all of you made really, really interesting points. I didn't actually think of it that way. at the end of the day an exciting project. We're seeing more projects like this. I wrote about a similar initiative in Africa, trying to bring internet to marginalized communities. So I think that I agree with Naomi. It's a very inspiring project, but they are, as Will said, going to face these problems, and they're only going to get worse. So we just have to wait and see how they cope with it, I guess. But yes, we're going to go into break, right, Zach?
That's right. I'll tease the break. We're going to go into break, and then on the flip side of the break, we're going to talk about friends with benefits, DAO, social club token thing. We're going to talk about that and more, FWB, etc. Stick with us. It's a hash. Hope you're having a good one.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Hash. Is crypto becoming the new hot ticket to getting into New York's exclusive social clubs? We're going to take a look at the growing mainstream media buzz around social clubs that require you to buy in with crypto tokens or NFTs. There was an expansive feature in the New York Times yesterday about a social club and DAO known as Friends with Benefits, which the Times described as the VIP lounge for crypto's creative class. Friends with Benefits started out as a small community group chat and grew into a kind of media empire over the last year, it says, with around 6,000 unique token holders. To get access to the community, you need to hold a certain amount of the Friends with Benefits token, and that can cost you thousands of dollars. It markets itself as a place for many things, discovering artists, publishing. It's a startup incubator and a space to learn about crypto investing. So this is not the only crypto social club that's been in the news lately. In January, Bloomberg reported on Maxwell Tribeca, an 8,000 square foot club set to open in July. To become a member, you need an NFT. Zach, I want to throw this to you first. Is this a new trend? What is so special about these crypto social clubs? And do they really need the crypto bit? Or is this just like a different form of, how do you say, like crypto FOMO or something? I don't know.
This is also December 2021. Shout out to Will Gottsegan for getting to the Friends with Benefits story way back when, all those many, many moons ago, looking at this phenomenon of social tokens and DAOs and sort of like token gated communities. I think it's something that, is real. It's in the early innings of it, whether it's, Gary Vee and his like Fly Fish Club to get into a fancy restaurant in New York, or whether it's Friends with Benefits, trying to attract creators and do cool things. I think it's great. I think we're seeing these experiments bubble up. Some will work, some won't. The ones that work could be potentially powerful and just ways to organize communities on the internet, right? That's something that I think is due for a refresh and is a big part of what Web3 says it wants to accomplish. So, I think, it's still early. We'll see what comes of these projects, but certainly ways to think about how tokens can be keys to experiences, communities, or other things is something that is really cool. I always go back to Adam Levine on this show, right? NFTs are keys. Right now, we're in the state where people are just oohing and awing over how nicely painted some of these keys are, without really understanding that they can be keys that open things. And so I think what these social clubs represent is that next evolution of, okay, cool, I have this NFT, but what does it do? Oh, I have this social token, but what does it do? And I think that's a great next step that people are going to try to figure out what makes sense for these things. So again, some of them will work, some of them will fail miserably. But the fact that it's happening, I think, is something that's going to continue to be noted in the New York Times and elsewhere. Will, you have any thoughts?
I have a few thoughts, definitely a few thoughts. The one thing that sparked my interest was that you have to hold a certain amount of these tokens in order to play with it, which is weird because it almost has like a price floor for the token itself. If you have like a limited supply and everyone has to hold the token, be a participant, you basically always have some sort of amount of liquidity in there. And so that might sound super geeky, but what it means is that there's always going to be money within this group, because there's no leakage from the system, right? There's always going to be a certain price value for that token because the holders of it are not selling it. And that brings up like the wealth status of this group, right? They're all going to hold this token and it's basically going to appreciate in price because the price floor can't really crunch down at all. And that brings some more status to it, right? There's, along with money comes the status involved with it. Just like all the other stories we've seen, that's been, the status has followed the money. We've seen, blank on a few of the names right now, but all the PFP tokens basically have been the same thing. The Bored Ape Yacht Club is the one I'm thinking of. They have like groups for this as well. You hold the token, you hold the NFT, and now you're part of the group, you're part of the class. So I think you're totally right, Zach. Like that's what's going to happen later with these keys. Right now, they're just nice things, but later they're going to open doors to different parts of crypto. And just to keep going on with my little liquidity money story here, that might be the thing that gets these NFTs through a bear market, right? If everyone's holding on to it, they can't sell it, they want to keep having access to like whatever clubs or fun things they get to do, like the startup incubator or whatnot, that might be a way to get through a bear market where you have to keep holding the token in order to get all access to these things. If there's a treasury involved or a DAO involved, then you kind of see a way where this community can continue going forward, where previously a lot of the stuff has been vaporware if there really hasn't been a roadmap to date. Zach, I'll throw it back up to you.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to this airdrop conversation that we were having, right? Like tokens are sort of turned out to be inherently sticky, right? And these are sort of those, okay, I have a little skin in the game in this online chat. I'm going to invest in making this Discord a better place to be. And you know what? If it ends up being a place that I don't want to be, sure, I'll sell these tokens. Maybe there is some liquidity there. So it's an opportunity for me to get out should I not want to feel invested in making this a better place collectively. And so I think as we think about, these online sort of like town squares, right? Having that mechanism, that skin in the game mechanism for like incentivized behavior and sort of collective positive movement is something that Friends with Benefits and many other projects are trying to figure out as they, hang out in Discords all day and talk about stuff. So I'm tossing it to Naomi for her thoughts.
Yeah, I completely agree, Zach. And there are a few things that make NFTs particularly interesting as we explore these new use cases. So first of all, really, these are just ownership tokens. They're things that say, I have ownership over this thing. They can be easily transferred. We've just created a secondary market for all of these things. So generally, when you become a member of a club, you have to go through this central hub where you're like, I want to become a member of your hub. You get approved by that. Well, now we have these secondary markets where you don't need to go through that major hub anymore. You can just be trading between each other. I can transfer, my entry into that club to Will, and it doesn't have to go through the place. As long as I have this token, I prove that I can enter. It's this very interesting kind of paradigm shift of what it means to have like exclusive membership with the club when that exclusivity isn't necessarily dictated by the club itself, right? It like kind of changes the gateway there and the prerequisites. And so we've created this whole new economy. Now we have things like, it's not just that I can transfer my NFT, my entry into this club. I could have, a rental service. We've seen those start to pop up where people have NFT rentals. And when it first came out, we were all like, what? Why do I want to rent an NFT? Is it so that I can have like a Bored Ape on my Twitter profile for like a day? And then we're starting to see, these NFTs have use cases. They just ownership their entryway. And so, yes, it makes sense to just rent out an NFT for a day if I want to access that club. So again, we've just expanded the market once more and created this whole new dynamic ecosystem around like membership, which is kind of cool, and we're really at the early stages of exploring what this this could mean. So I'm pretty interested in seeing how NFTs develop and how, especially like this social club scene around NFTs develops as well. But Zach, I'll throw it to you for final thoughts.
Yeah, and I think the flip side of the DAO is the social token, and we've seen some early experiments around that. Whether it be with Roll or Rally or some of these platforms, and I think ways to sort of turn that into, again, a community experience around micro creators and micro communities or whatever. It could be really interesting. But Naomi, back to you.
Sorry, just final thought there, as just before we move on to the next topic. I will say that the SEC is starting to look into NFTs. So if you're doing fractional ownership, if you're doing, whatever it is, if you're investing in this, you're thinking that you have partial ownership of a club that you're frequenting, like all of these things come into play, and SEC is starting to look into whether or not these are actually investment contracts and whether or not they're going to be shutting them down soon. So we will see if the SEC is going to ruin another good thing that the tech community has developed. So let's move on. Will, I'll throw it to you for the next story.
Zach, really quick, do you have something?
Oh, I just was going to say, Naomi, you're spot on. Like, also the IRS is looking at this stuff. But as it relates to the securities question, does this give you access to future rewards that are deemed to be similar to a relationship to owning a security, something that's going to be hashed out in the courts probably before long. Last story of the day is Will's. Will, take it away.
It is my story. So, headline here first. This is speculative, so we don't have all information. But according to Crypto Noticias, Venezuela is being actively blacklisted by the largest crypto wallet out there, Metamask. What does this mean? Well, we don't know, for one, if it is actually true or not yet. There's been some reports that it is being blacklisted. There's been some other reports that maybe it's not being blacklisted. But it does continue on a earlier story that we've seen through the past few years, that MetaMask and Infura, which is the server behind MetaMask, has blacklisted other jurisdictions in the past. A lot of Ethereum tech has had to blacklist jurisdictions in the past. Why is that? Well, a lot of these projects are based out of the US and they have to comply to US laws. The big story here is decentralized tech actually decentralized? And why can it blacklist people if it claims to be decentralized? Right now, again, the Crypto Noticias article does say that people are being blacklisted. That's after some reports on Twitter. It's also after a Zendesk article, or basically like a FAQ article on MetaMask itself was updated in the last hour, saying that they were blacklisting some addresses. So there is some indications that this is true, but there's been some other indications that it's perhaps not completely factually correct right now. Zach, I want to throw this one up to you. What does it say about the state of decentralized tech if things can be blacklisted?
Well, it says that it is sanction season. Sanctions and crypto are very much in the spotlight right now. You have lawmakers on Capitol Hill saying, what is this crypto sanctions evasion thing? And I think it's something that a lot of companies in the space are very worried about. They have to comply with OFAC sanctions, or else the long arm of the law is going to crack down on them very hard. And I think what we're seeing here is some of those follow-on effects of a lot of these conversations that have suddenly stepped into the spotlight. Again, as Will mentioned, right, this is not new. Gitcoin and other consensus-related efforts. Well, Gitcoin is one effort, and then there was another consensus sort of like education initiative, had to withdraw its services from certain blacklisted jurisdictions, basically because they were scared that they were going to get sued out of existence by various regulators here in the US and abroad. So while the beauty of the Ethereum vision is that it's a world computer that gives access to all people everywhere for financial applications and other uses, that's the vision. The reality is that a lot of the pieces that are touching the Ethereum blockchain are administered by known entities that exist in known jurisdictions and have to comply with known regulations. And I think as crypto sanctions evasion takes a spotlight on Capitol Hill, we may be seeing more of these things happen where certain services are geofenced and restricted to various groups. But I'll toss it to Naomi. I saw, Will, you had your hand up. I'll let you guys duke it out.
Yeah, I'll just go quickly and then throw it to you, Will. On what you were saying, Zach, about what happened in Iran when you had Consensus suddenly banning Iranian students from attending this Ethereum coding class, it's so devastating to see things like that happen. And it's just another example of how sanctions hurt the people in a country, not the, supposedly despotic or authoritarian regime they're trying to bring down. It's hurting the people. And generally, the idea behind these things is, well, then the people will rise up and they'll put pressure on their government because, then the government will relent because of all these people. It's like generally the leaders in this country don't care about their people. They're not going to care if people are rising up. They're probably just going to kill them, right? So all these sanctions do is hurt the most vulnerable people in the world. So it makes me so angry. And what they said in this case, they said, you are located in a country that we're prohibited from providing goods and services to under US law. And so you have people in Iran who are trying to, have a better life, try to, drag themselves out of war zones, trying to improve their situation by learning skill sets and contributing, becoming part of this global economy. And then US law comes in and says, like, no, you people stay there and you're unable to participate. I just think it's so disgusting to see things like this happen. So I just wanted to get that little rant out there. Like, this is not the way to behave and create like a civilized world, to just block out entire races, entire populations. It's crazy. But Will, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, I just want to note the quick fact check there by Zach. The Metamask has not been blacklisted in other jurisdictions. It's the education thing from Consensus, and then also the Gitcoin thing, which definitely was a headline. It was a head turner at the time. But Naomi, I just want to throw up what you're saying again. This really matters. If it's decentralized tech, then you should be able to use these things everywhere. But when it comes to developers and it comes to the meat space and jail time being an actual real thing, developers have to look in their own self-interest, and they're going to blacklist things if they have to. But we'll leave the conversation there.
We will. We have some reporters filing this as we speak. I was just looking at the draft. All right. Anyway, we'll have more on that in a bit. But thanks so much for being with us on the Hash today. It was good times. Thanks, Will. Thanks, Naomi. Thanks, Sandali. Appreciate you all. Thanks for doing it. You're watching CoinDesk TV. We got more stuff later on. I think it's at 3 p.m. Eastern. Check that out. Website has some news. You know the drill. We're wrapping it. I'm Zach. We'll talk to you later. See ya.